All right, so in this video right here, what we want to teach folks is how to multiply something like square root of x times x to the fourth. Now, do these have like bases? Are both bases x? Yep. So we can multiply these. What you need to understand is what square root of x means. Okay? What's understood to be right here that they don't write? No, a 2. Okay? When you say square root, okay, it's a 2. If I wanted to know the cubed root of something, then I'd have a 3 here. The cube root of x would be that right there, wouldn't it? And then the fourth root of x would be that right there. So this right here, we would say the square root of x. This is the cubed root of x, and this is the fourth root of x. Now, when we say cube root of 8, we're asking ourselves what times what times what will give me 8, right? So if you look, 2 times 2 times 2 gives me 8, so the cube root of 8 is 2, right? Now the question is, if I wanted to know the fifth root of 10, how do I do that? How do I even calculate that in the calculator? Okay, so here's the basic information you need to understand. Fifth root is the same thing as taking 10 and raising it to the 1/5 power. Okay, the fifth root of something is the same thing as raising it to the what? 1/5 power. So if I'm taking the square root of x, that's the same thing as taking x and raising it to, since it's the square root, raising it to the 1/2 power. Did y'all know that? Okay, so let's look at, what if I have the cube root of x? Then that's going to be the same thing as x raised to the what power? The 1/3 power. If I have the fourth root of x, I wrote that wrong. Won't let me move it either. If I have the fourth root of x like this, that's the same thing as x to the 1/4 power, right? And so if I asked you, what is the fourth root of, say, 11? Well, that's really hard to do in your head, but if you wanted to put it in the calculator, you'd put 11, and then you'd raise it to the 1/4 power. And so 11 to the 1/4 power was 1.8 what? Okay, 821, and it's a decimal that goes on and on forever, right? And so what we're saying is if I do 1.821 times 1.821 times 1.821 times 1.821, we're going to get really close to 11, aren't we? Now, since it's a decimal, it may be 10.999 or 11.0001, but it's going to be extremely close, isn't it? Okay, so that's how you calculate like the fourth root of a number. Now, let's go back to our original problem, though. On our original problem, we were asked, what is the square root of x times x to the what power? Fourth power. Right? That was our original problem. And you don't know how to do that, but now that you know that square root of x means what?
Raising it to the 1/2.
X to the 1/2 power times x to the fourth. Let me ask you this. Do I have like bases? My bases are both x's, aren't they? When you have like bases, what do you do with their exponents? Add. And so you're going to do 1/2 plus 4, which is x to the 4.5 power, isn't it? And so that's your answer for the square root of x times x to the fourth power. It's x to the 4.5 power. Okay, so in this example, I've got the cube root of x times x to the fifth times 3x squared y. The hard part is I have to recognize that the cube root of x means x to the what power? 1/3. And once I know that, this is an easy problem. So I'm going to rewrite this as x raised to the 1/3 power times x to the fifth times 3x squared y. Right? Now the coefficient for each of these terms is 1, 1, and in this case it's 3. And so what I'm doing is I'm going 1 times 3, which is 3. Okay? And then I have x to the 1/3 times x to the 5th times x to the 7th. So I'm adding all those exponents, aren't I? I'm doing 1/3 plus 5 plus 2, which is 7 plus 1/3, which is 7.3 repeating, right? Let's make it a not an estimate. In other words, I want it to be an improper fraction, 7 plus 1/3. So what we would do is we need to take this 7 and get it a common denominator with 1/3. So I'm going to multiply the bottom by 3 and the top by 3. And so I have 3 times 7 is 21 over 3 plus 1 over 3, which is 22 over 3. Okay? So I have x to the 22 over 3 power. And then there's nothing to multiply y by. You see how right here I have a y here, but I don't have it in any of the other terms, so I'm just going to put times y. And that's your answer right there. Now your original problem wrote your answer, or wrote the problem where it had a square root, right? In other words, the original problem didn't say x to the 1/3 power, did it? And so we need to write our answer where it's in the square root power as well. Form as well. Okay? Now when we have the cube root of x and we write it as x to the 1/3, the number that's right here is on the bottom of the fraction, isn't it? And the number on top is the power that this is 2. So this is x to the first power, and then the 3's on the bottom, isn't it? And so right here I have x to the 22 power, and it's the cube root, isn't it? And so if we want to write this in the form with a root, we'd say 3 times the cube root of x to what power? What's x raised to what power? What's it say right here? X to the what power? 22nd power, so I'm going to write a 22 here, times y. Now notice how I cut off my radical right here. In other words, the y is not included in the radical. Some people will even put a parentheses here and here, right? So notice that what's on bottom of the fraction in the exponent, that's your root, right? And what's on top, that's what the term's being raised to that power right there. Y'all see that?